Hi, I'm Frank Zafiro, and if you're here, it's because it's Hump Day readings. Every week I read something that I've written, short, unfiltered, maybe a little bit of story to go with it. This week I'm going to read the beginning of a short story called Adam Raised a Cain. That is in the third volume, the third issue of Down and Out the magazine. And this story is kind of a prequel story to the novel Blood on Blood, which will be out April 30th from Down and Out Books, featuring the protagonist, Mick Sawyer, that I wrote in Blood on Blood. Jim Wilsky wrote Jersey Sawyer, Mick's half-brother. And in Blood on Blood, you find out Mick's an ex-cop and kind of a tainted hero, and something went bad, and you get some hints about it, but it still remains a little bit of a mystery. This short story is about that mystery, and so it's set several years before Blood on Blood. And if you're wondering about the title, I'll talk about that after the reading. So, Adam Raised a Cain by Frank Zafiro. The first time is the toughest, they say, and they float that little nugget of bullshit about, don't they? It's always hardest the first time, and then it gets easier and easier. Hell, I don't know, maybe for some things that's true, but that hasn't been my experience. I came on the job with no illusions about cops or the city of Chicago. I grew up in this town, and I know how things work. Most people are struggling to get by, and everyone is looking for an angle. A badge doesn't change that nearly as much as it should. What I didn't realize was that for some people, the badge is just another opportunity, another tool to help you run another kind of game with the same end in mind. I should have known. My old man, Gar Sawyer, was a career heister. Usually he was small time, and we lived mostly hand to mouth when I was a kid. Sometimes he scored a good haul, and that made for one or two decent Christmases. Then he left my mother for his Polish mistress, and things went back to being hand to mouth. Through it all, I saw how he interacted with the cops more than once. See, I didn't have the frame of reference that he was the bad guy and they were the good guys. He was my old man, and until he bailed on me and Ma, he was the ultimate good guy. These cops that were always hassling him and sometimes putting him in cuffs, they were the bad guys. Didn't help that Gar talked shit about the cops at any opportunity, including when they came around, and he fought with them almost every time he got arrested. There's nothing pretty about seeing your old man getting gang-piled by 3 cops. Worse than that, when he was done fighting, it never failed that they lay a few more shots on top of it all before they hauled him away. In those days, though, he'd always come back. Sometimes a day later, sometimes a few days, but he always came back. He'd sit in the kitchen, sipping whiskey and smoking his cigarettes with his black eye or busted nose, and he'd tell me how those crooked fuckers took his last $20 out of his pocket on the way to jail. Then he'd laugh and say they probably spent it on some hustler over on West Garfield. You can see why he was my hero, and why the cops were the bad guys to me. Later, though, my eyes slowly opened. First, Gar took off to live with, and eventually marry, his Polish girlfriend. At least he had the decency to wait on the actual marriage until after my mother died. When she passed, I had to go live with him and his new family. Along with the Polish wife, who I refused to call my stepmother, I had to deal with Jersey, Gar's illegitimate son by her. He was close to my age, and it didn't take a math genius to figure out how long Gar had been seeing this other woman on the side. Slowly I began to see how dead-end his lifestyle really was. How money was never steady and never enough. If he'd done honest work, we'd have come out ahead. Yeah, the flush times wouldn't have been so flush, but the lean times wouldn't have been so lean either. Expecting Gar to work a straight job was crazy, though, even when the life grinded him down. I saw it all, how the lines in his face hardened and deepened, and how he started to seem less heroic and more desperate. Jersey idolized him. Jersey wanted to be him. Not me. No, by the time I was old enough to move out of the house, I wanted to be the polar opposite of Gar Sawyer. So I joined the cops, and went from being the red-headed stepchild of the family to being the black sheep. Needless to say, no one came to my academy graduation. Early on, I was lucky not to get assigned anywhere near my old neighborhood. Other guys on the job told me stories of having to arrest people they grew up with or had gone to high school with. The shit Gar and Jersey were into, I thought my odds were better that I'd be arresting someone with the same last name as me. I took to the work, though. Knowing the street helps. There's an old adage that a cop is just a criminal who didn't get arrested young and decided to change sides before he got caught. And maybe there's some truth to that, at least in this city. Knowing the rules of the game on the street made it easier to figure out what was what and to make better decisions. It helped knowing who to talk to reasonably and who to just smack upside the head because you knew they weren't ever going to listen. Pete Harris was the training officer they put me with for my last rotation. After I passed my final test and he signed off on me, one of the guys on their platoon retired, so they left Harris and me as partners. If I hadn't been so gung-ho about the job itself, I might have objected. Harris wasn't flat out lazy, but he wasn't looking to break a sweat either. If there was an easier way to do something, he knew what it was, and that's how we did it. What did I learn from Pete? His go-to was how to talk a citizen out of filing a report. I could write this up, but you know nothing is going to happen with this, right? But he perfected the drive-by welfare check, too. Lights are off, no one's home, it's all fine. When he was my training officer, I kept my mouth shut and did what he said because that's what was expected, and with my family background, I was the last rookie who could afford to make waves. Once I was off probation and he trotted out those beauties, I still didn't say anything. I just took out my pen and started the report, or shut off the patrol car and went to knock on the door. Pete would give me a pained expression and shake his head like I just gave $20 to a scam artist or took in a stray kitten, but he'd go along. Not backing up your partner was the biggest sin there was, even if he was making more work for you. My real education came from Al. He was our sergeant and looked every bit the Italian Chicago cop. And Al shows up in Blood on Blood. So I think that's a good place to stop. Again, this is in Volume 3 of Down and Out the magazine, which is out here in late March of 2018. A bit on the title. It's the title of a Bruce Springsteen song, which is about fathers and sons and the dark side of that relationship. And clearly, if you've just been listening, there's a dark side to the relationship between Mick and Gar. And in fact, in the novel Blood on Blood, it pretty much starts with Gar calling Mick and Jersey to his prison deathbed and sending them on a quest, so to speak. Well, if this was a fantasy, it'd be a quest. Since it's a mystery, they're sending the two brothers to cooperate and battle each other pretty much to try to recover some lost loot. Anyway, that's Adam Raised a Cain. If you want to read the rest of the story, Down Out the Magazine, Volume 3. And we'll see you next Wednesday.